Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Culture Books podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 28. We are covering use of weapons. We're almost at the end, within touching distance. This is the penultimate use of weapons episode. My name is John. We are covering Chapter 14. That's 14 written, not in Roman numerals, because that's a very important distinction with this book. My name is John, and I'm joined by...
Sheridan.
Okay, and Sheridan, how are you?
I'm pretty good. We've got to get into it.
You're pretty good? Okay, you're ready to roll.
I'm ready to get into it.
You're loaded for bear.
Well, I thought there was just one twist.
Mm-hmm.
But there's two.
Yeah. We will discuss when we get to the twist, which twist you think is bigger. But yes. Okay, and what do we do at this moment in the podcast?
You have 30 seconds to recount the story thus far.
Okay, and count me in.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so this timeline, the forward-arching one, has been following Sheridan in Zakalwe, agent of the culture, as he travels through the galaxy trying to prevent a war. He's just been betrayed by the culture, told to fight for one side, turned out the culture wanted the other side to win, didn't expect him to do as well as he did. All his army's been wiped out, and he's extremely damaged. He's had broken bones, he's got missing bits, he's in a terrible state, and he's going to find out where he came from. Okay, and now Sheridan is going to try and recap this chapter. So we're going to get to the twist. Spoiler alert. Okay, Sheridan, your time starts in 3, 2, 1.
I can't recap the chapter because Ford Zakalwe is really a lithium. That's the twist.
That's all you got?
No, I'll do it.
20 seconds.
Zakalwe's hurt. Everyone's trying to look after him. He gets taken back to his planet, meets Livuetta. She reveals to everyone that he's really the murderous psycho and has been living that way for 200 years.
Yes, and that's your time. Well done.
Was that a good recap?
Yep. That might be your best ever. Okay, so let's get into the chapter. So I guess, Sheridan, I mean, the audience is here for you because you're the noob and they want to hear what you think of it. What were you expecting as this chapter opened? Because you'd had the chair twist and then it's like back to this timeline. Does it even matter?
I don't think too deeply about these things, John.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, it seemed like everyone was, or you were saying there was going to be a twist, but I didn't expect it to be this. But now it makes sense why there's the forward narrative and the back narrative. And I do recall there's sometimes during the process of this very long read-along podcast.
It's been going on several years now. Yep.
That I was like, that doesn't really make any sense why Zakalwe is doing that because of X, Y, Z. But now it does because it wasn't the same person.
And there are a couple of, when you go back and read it again, if you ever choose to do so, some very deliberately vague and misdirecting in their vagueness passages, like the bit when the chip comes out of Dark Ence's body and enters what we now know is Elitheimel's heart, but it's not specified, but you assume it's the narrator. So there's a lot of, it's well worth, if you ever feel a desire to, a second read knowing what you know now, and it's almost like reading another book. It's part of the breadth and depth of the Ian Banks experience.
But do we know, Zakalwe kills himself? That's what's implied, right?
Yeah.
Because of the chair.
Yeah. Elitheimel's weapon worked.
But then how does he get into his body?
Who gets into whose body?
Elitheimer.
He doesn't get into his body.
What, how does he become to look like Zakalwe?
Well, because when he jumps on the spaceship as a refugee at the end of the war, and gives his name as... actually, he gave a whole other name, remember it. He didn't take up the Zakalwe name until he landed on the next planet.
Oh, so they don't even look the same?
No.
Oh, so then how come... Is this the first time he saw Livuetta? Well, she knows he's faking
No,
it.
you can remember Diziet did take Zakalwe to see Livuetta once before, and she talks about it in this chapter, and she just screamed at them, and so they ran away.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't get to the bottom of what was going on there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, all right, sure.
Sorry,
We'll kick on. Now, the intro, weirdly, is not as disorientating as many in this book, so I won't read the opening paragraph. But down the bottom of the page, it starts, "He would not listen to sense, and still the xenophobe, when it had picked them all up, had refused to pronounce the man insane and incapable of making up his own mind, and so had dutifully put him into a low metabolism sleep for the 15-day journey to the planet where the woman called Livuetta Zakalwe now lived." So the xenophobe, the ship, is back. Remember, it was introduced to us as a fairy, having parties with a crew that were trying to give themselves diseases to experience life fully. And then the description of we're going to keep calling him Zakalwe because it's the name by which he's known in these books. "The man was a walking mess, and there were still 2 bullets inside him, but he refused to accept any treatment until he'd seen this woman. Bizarre," Scaffan Amtiscor thought, using an extended field to block the path of a small insect as it felt and picked its way up the trunk of the tree. The insect changed direction, feelers waving. There was another type of insect further up the trunk, and Scaffan Amtiscor was trying to get them to meet to see what would happen. And I did read that thinking, this is how the culture minds treat humans. We're interesting insects, and they're manipulating our lives to see what would happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, you had something to say?
No, go.
Okay. Now we get the moment where he sees the Staber end, and this has got a quite intensely personal thing for me here. But I'll read the passage and then talk about it and talk about Ian Banks and his father. "Shit," he breathed and tried to straighten, blinking in the sudden slant of sunlight as the mist continued to evaporate. He stumbled another couple of steps, shook Smar off, and turned round once, taking in the parkland, shaped trees and manicured lawns, ornamental walls and delicate pergolas, stone-bordered ponds and shady paths through quiet groves, and in the distance, set amongst mature trees, the tattered black shape of the Staber end. "They've made a fucking park out of it," he breathed, and stood swaying, bent slightly at the waist, looking at the battered silhouette of the old warship. Smar walked to his side. He seemed to sag a little, and she put her arm around his waist again. He grimaced with pain. They walked on, down towards a path which led to the ship.
You said shit like Clay Davis from The Wire. That's not how it was said in the audiobook.
Really? I mean, it was written that way. It was,
It's more like shit.
Well, it had 3 eyes.
Yeah.
I think.
I just really like how Clay Davis says that in The Wire.
This predates that, so
True.
Now, there is one thing with the depiction of Staber End with all its damage being preserved as a museum, because the greatest of all the British battleships, the Warspite, was scrapped at the end of World War II, despite significant public opposition, and the excuse given was that it couldn't be brought up to museum condition because it was so damaged.
That's interesting.
And Ian Banks's father was a Royal Naval officer, and Banks was deeply invested in the industrial history of the Royal Navy. So I suspect there's a bit of projection of Warspite onto this, because for fans of the ship, we didn't want it restored to mint condition. You want to see it with its concrete patches and its sides blown out, and because it fought in both World War I and World War II, and fought through a colossal number of battles.
That's an interesting argument as a
museum person.
I do work in the GLAM sector,
mm-hmm.
Which is galleries, libraries, archives, and museums for those uninformed. Which I appreciate that. That's fine.
Yeah.
I haven't worked in a military museum, but it's it's very common to preserve these large vessels, especially maritime vessels. they're very expensive to maintain because they have to be kept in working order and all this sort of thing. But yeah, that's an interesting. I mean, I don't know of a battleship that is a. I guess there would be lots of them in museums all over the world.
Well, the Americans have, I think, 6, and the Japanese have the only British-built battleship still above the waterline, which they preserved, which was one of that served in the Japanese Navy, the Mikasa, which does give the lie to the British excuse, oh, we didn't have any money to preserve battleships after the war. It's like, well, if the Japanese after World War II, with their cities still glowing with mushroom clouds, could keep one, then what's your excuse? But
they are expensive, I'll give you that.
Yeah, I mean, Mikasa in Tokyo is encased in concrete, a bit like the description here. The stable is not going to float anywhere anytime soon. But
so who? When he said they've made it a museum, who did that?
In the book,
yeah, who preserved it?
The winners of the Civil War decided they were going to keep it as a monument to the war.
So now that would have been Zakalwe
side, yeah.
Though proper Zakalwe.
Well, proper Zakalwe is dead, but his side decided that they were going to.
But Zakalwe would have been on the ship.
You mean Elothiamel?
So who would have been fighting on the ship when it won?
Well, Elothiamel's side lost, right?
Yes.
Zakalwe's side won.
Yes.
Elothiamel disappeared in the chaos and got himself on this slow ship to somewhere else.
So he's annoyed that they've made it a museum, but they won. Like, why wouldn't they do that?
Well, yeah, they've turned his battleship into a trophy, which is a very common thing throughout history.
Yeah.
To take someone's fallen armor, but they've kept it in its damaged state with all its scars of war. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the. Yeah, we've really gone off for a while on that point, which I'm glad because I found it very moving.
But what a surprise! You're talking about a museum, and I went off track.
For those who listen who don't know, I do a podcast about tanks as well. It's called Totally Tanked. If you can listen to it. And one of the things I love with going to tank festivals is seeing screaming kids hanging onto the outside of tanks, having the time of their life. And we're talking, German Panzers and things like that were absolute instruments of terror and destruction in their prime, but they are, to the extent that something inanimate is enjoying an afterlife as something that screaming kids can have a great time on. I think that's the best ending for these vehicles.
Oh, well, look, I mean, there's also the opposite argument that they should be used for war veterans to find some sort of closure from their experiences in war. That's commonly why these things are preserved, not for the war Disneyland.
Yeah, I mean, you do get veterans at tank festivals. World War II veterans are extremely rare now, but certainly Cold War veterans will come to these things as well, and will jump on and enjoy a ride as well. So it's a combination. It's inclusive. But
anyway, we've digressed.
Sure, it's an enjoyable digression though. So let's move on.
We've got to get on to the twist though.
A whole two paragraphs further. Why did you want to come here, Sharadanine? Smar asked. She isn't here. This isn't where she is. I know, he breathed. I know that. So why do you want to see this wreck? He was silent for a little while. It was as though he hadn't heard. But then, as he took a deep breath, flinching with pain, as he did so and shook his sweat-sheened head, as he said, "Oh, just for old time's sake." They passed through other copses of trees. He shook his shaved head again as they came out of the grove and saw the ship better. "I just didn't think they'd do this to it," he said. "Do what?" Smar asked. "This," he nodded at the blackened hull. "What have they done, Sharadanine?" Smar said patiently. "Made it..." He began, then stopped, coughed, body tensed with pain. "Made the damn thing an ornament, preserved it." "What, the ship?" "Yes," he looked at her as though she were crazy. "Yes," he said. "Yes, the ship. Just a big old battleship hulk cemented into a dock as far as Scaphomantiscor could see. It contacted the xenophobe, which was passing the time by making a detailed map of the planet. Hello, ship. This ship ruin in the park. Zakalwe seems very interested. Just wondering why. Care to do some research?" "In a while. I've still got one continent, the deep sea beds and the subsurface to do. They'll still be there later. This could prove interesting now. Patience, Scaffin Amtiscor. Pedant, thought the drone, breaking off.
Now, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Does Scaffin Amtiscor know that it's not Zakalwe?
No.
He's sus on it, though.
I don't feel this faction of the culture knows what's going on here. I suspect there might be other factions of the culture that do, but they haven't shared the information. But Scaffin's view, Scaffin wants to know what's going on and is trying to get the ship to help him figure it out. So he's not well briefed.
He's sus, though. He knows something's up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, he's like, it's like, why is this guy getting so upset about a 200-year-old, battleship encased in concrete? Now, I did like the description, because every particularly older historical site you visit has got these relics of previous interpretive displays, which are in different states of repair. Yeah, I mean, particularly when touchscreens became all the rage, going on 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago in museums. And then you go now, and the operating system's totally out of date, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. And this is obviously even more out of date from an Ian Banks' point of view of technology, because it's got a little magnetic tape drive that dies. But Scaffin Mantiscor activated one of the old information points as it passed. A slow, crackly tape started up. The vessel you steered before you. This was going to take ages, Scaffin thought. It used its effector to speed the machine up, winding the voice up into a high-pitched warble. The tape broke. Scaffin delivered the effector equivalent of a annoyed slap and left the information machine smoking and dripping burning plastic onto the gravel beneath as the two humans walked into the shadow of the battered ship. I mean, we've been to museum ships, which things like this happen. I do drag Sheridan to see museum ships. I'm not sorry.
I'm okay. I like museums. I could probably do with more art museums. But
Sheridan's having we've got a whiskey, because this is a seminal chapter. We're trying to get back into doing the whiskey thing.
This is a very nice whiskey. I don't think it would have been a very expensive one.
Look, it was twice the cost of a cheap bottle of Johnny Walker Red.
So what is this that
It's called Dimple.
Dimple.
And
it's cute.
It's a blended whiskey. It's got quite a beautiful bottle. It's three-sided with you'd be surprised to learn dimples in it.
It's very smooth. It's
very smooth. I find it a little too smooth, but I mean, a blended whiskey is all about the
too smooth.
Yeah.
You like to.
I just like a bit of fire in my whiskey, a bit of smoke.
I quite like this.
Yeah, it's so if you don't normally think of yourself as a whiskey drinker, and we're drinking these out of our Mount Fuji glasses that we got from the Tokyo bureau chief. So yeah. Anyway, so Dimple, it's smooth. If you want smoke and fire, not the whiskey, but if you want a nice whiskey for sipping, might well work for you. I just highlighted a tiny little conversation here. One of the toddlers cried when she saw the hobbling, bald-headed man with the staring eyes behind her. And this is, all through this chapter, he's building up this sense of what a wreck Zakalwe is at this point, from the charismatic, long-haired, charming, young seeming man that started the book.
So I've just got to stop, because I'm just struggling with this. Because what I assumed, which I guess I shouldn't have because it's not written, was this some sort of, culture technology of him going into the old body, or getting Zakalwe's body. But it's not that. So I don't understand how he's able to just start being Zakalwe when he doesn't look like him.
Because no one where he went knew what Zakalwe looked like. You've got to particularly remember at the end of World War II, all these Germans that went to Brazil and South Australia.
Yeah, but these people have bloody ships and mines and things.
Yeah, but the culture's never paid too much attention to this planet.
The culture must know, though.
Well, the xenophobe is doing a basic survey of the continents because it doesn't know anything about this planet and it thinks it wants to take a look. The galaxy's very big.
The culture's a bit lame, though. They're meant to be really powerful and cool.
But this is an idea of just how big the galaxy is, that there are still places the culture hasn't gone. So enjoy the wonder of this colossal galaxy that you live in, Sheridan.
How do you live for 200 years, though?
Well, because the culture extended his life, and remember he cold slept 100 of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Smar should have been a bit more shocked.
Well, we'll get to Smar's reaction when we get to Smar's reaction.
Okay, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah. So, but moving along
I do feel as though the chapter really loses itself, though, once the twist happens. It was fine reading it at the time, but now I'm like, I just want to talk about the twist, but we'll talk about the other stuff.
Okay. So it's funny because Sheridan actually did the audiobook 3 weeks ago, and so I thought we were going to do the episode 3 weeks ago, but life got in the way. But
I got a new job. This is my third job since the start of this podcast. And I don't really change jobs that often.
Yeah. Anyway, we have gone on a while, but I did get this moment where Sheridan sort of looked at me and said, "We need to talk about this as soon as possible," and then it happened 3 weeks later. Here we are, though. We're doing it. So then we get this the increasingly faltering Zakalwe, and I thought Banks did a very good job of, in writing, describing the decline of Zakalwe. I imagine in the audiobook Peter Kenny's voice is getting ever more feeble, but in terms of writing,
he did a good job.
Writing that was I really liked it. Anyway, let's go. Dizzy, he smiled a watery sort of smile. "Take me to her, please." And then I did like that Scaffin had to pretend he was a suitcase again to get carried around by Smar so people wouldn't see him floating around. Remember we had that at the start of the book? And then the wounded man was a heavier weight on her other arm. And finally, Scaffin gets the back in touch with the xenophobe. "Have you finished drawing things yet?" it asked the xenophobe. "No." "Can't you devote just a little of your supposedly bogglingly fast mind to find out why he's so interested in that ship?" "Oh, I suppose so, but wait a minute. What have we here? Listen to this." "You'll find out, I suppose. Past time I told you," he said. So that's Zakalwe talking to Smar and saying he was born here, and then retelling the story of the big house and the rich kids, and the war did start, he said, looking at but not seeing the last of the suburbs flow past. The countryside was a green blur as they accelerated again, and the two boys that had become men ended up on different sides. "Fascinating," the xenophobe communicated to Scaffin. "I think I will do a little quick research." So you had asked a few times about how they ended up on opposite sides of the war, and I thought they got resolved in that passage there. Did you feel that got resolved?
It doesn't really say how.
No, but it says that they did, and
yeah, but it doesn't say why.
Have you ever studied a civil war?
But I feel like even in the Civil War movies, there's a bit more of a sort of explanation of like, well, I like this side's politics, or I'm, but there's no discussion of that. I mean, it's resolved to the extent it's happened.
Okay, I mean, would you actually want another 20 pages on the politics of this planet?
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe right now, reading it at this point, but, then I obviously get to the twist and I've forgotten about that.
Okay, I'll continue. He told them about the war and the siege that involved the Staberend and the besieged forces breaking out. And he told them about the man, the boy who'd played in the garden, who in the depths of one terrible night had caused the thing to be done, which led him to being called the Chairmaker. And the dawn, when Darkence's sister and brother had found what Elithiamel had done, and the brother trying to take his own life, giving up his generalship, abandoning the armies, and his sister in the selfishness of despair.
I mean, I guess that's why. That the families rejected him because of...
Well, I mean, at this point, he's still telling it as if he's Zakalwe, though.
True.
So it's like, and selfishness of despair, Tolkien dwelled on a lot. And, I'd be surprised if anyone listening to this podcast hasn't, felt the touch of the black dog at times. And I've always thought describing despair as selfish to be a little unkind to the despairing. But I also do realise that, at times we just need to say, hang on, we need to think of other people instead of just ourselves in these feelings we have.
Well, it's one of those sort of funny things, isn't it? When people are like, when you're depressed or whatever, they say just snap out of it. You've got so much to live for. People care about you. But I mean, this selfishness sometimes can't be helped.
I think it's a matter of degree with selfishness. Like it's okay to go into a personal cave for a couple of weeks. It's a little selfish, but it's not causing too much trouble to anyone else. Whereas killing yourself is a degree of despair that is still socially frowned on.
Getting probably a bit off track.
A little off track, but I think it's relevant.
But
to the passage.
if suicide is people that commit suicide often think they're doing everyone around them a favour. Because
the reality is they are not.
Well, because they're getting, that people don't have to deal with them anymore, and yeah.
It's an interesting turn of phrase that I just thought was worth a little.
But it's interesting that Zakalwe tried to kill himself back then, as well as because this is when he says found what Alethea had done and the brother trying to take his own life.
Yeah,
and then later when he gets the chair, he kills himself.
What do you mean later? That's earlier.
No, but when does he get the chair?
Okay, so this is Zakalwe talking as if he's... Sorry, this is Alethea talking as if he's Zakalwe, talking about how Zakalwe tried to take his life because he can't say Zakalwe killed himself at this point because he's not admitting that he's Alethea.
But isn't he talking about the time when... Alethea had sex with her.
No. Giving up his armies, abandoning his armies.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
This is all the chairmaker stuff.
Sorry, it's so confusing.
Yeah, it's meant to be. It's all part of the rich depth.
Well, that's why he says trying to take his own life.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then we finally get, because the Liv Uetta timeline has made no sense up until this moment, and finally we get the explanation. And so Liv Uetta Zakalwe gave up and took another long journey to get away from the burden of her memories and where she had ended up. The ship quizzed the drone for the location. Scaffin gave it the name of the planet and the system a few decades away. That had been where she'd finally been tracked down after his last job for them. So it's this idea that Liv Uetta had taken a slow ship a few, maybe months behind Zakalwe, and then she'd gone somewhere else, and then that had been where Dizier had turned up with Zakalwe, and she said, I hate this man, and then she finally had returned to where she came from.
Yeah.
And she'd taken, that's why she's still alive, because she'd done these long cold sleep journeys.
Yeah, right. I like this description, the grey-haired woman in her early, late years.
Mm-hmm.
I like the description of an early, late year.
Yeah, that's look, I've seen the demographics on Spotify who listen to this podcast, and we've all got a lot of grey hair, and we're
in our early late years.
I remember my parents trying to describe to me when I was very young that my grandmother was middle-aged, and I thought she was the oldest person that I'd ever seen. But
how old would she have been?
Oh, she probably lives another 30 years after that. So, yeah.
So she was like 50. She was your age.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah. All of this chapter is best from Scaffin's point of view. The drone had learned to appreciate the full range of pan-human facial expression and thought that in witnessing the one that appeared on Liv Uetta Zakalwe's face when she saw Zakalwe, it had experienced something close to unique. Such surprise, such hatred. And it's like for Dizier and the drone, they're like, well, it's his long lost, brother and sister. They should be so happy to see each other. Although they had their previous attempt to bring them together, which it must have been a really, no craps given situation where they didn't follow up on why this woman had gone berserk the last time they tried this. His face looked drawn and grey and old. She could not remember ever having seen him look so ancient and ill. Damn it, he'd looked healthier when he'd been beheaded. Zakalwe, she whispered, shaking her head, what's wrong with you? Death wish, the drone muttered quietly, with extrovert complications. I do love the assessment of death wish with extrovert complications. And then we finally get More of Livuetta speaking. Why do you keep doing this? Livuetta, Zakalwe said softly. Her voice was still young. The drone thought, just as the xenophobe came back with some fascinating information it had gleaned from historical records. Really, the drone signalled. Dead? Now, this is where the twist starts to unfold.
Yes.
And we'll want to know, Sheridan, what did you think when Scaffin said dead that it was talking about?
But that's only implied. Like, you don't know he's dead.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of the fun, I guess. Zakalwe put a bullet in his head, and sometimes that's survivable, and we've all been working on the assumption on a first read through that's what happened. And then it's mysterious at this point where the drone's signaling dead, and until you know what's happened, you're not quite sure what they meant by that. But then once you find out what's happened, it's like, oh, it all unravels backwards in your mind.
Yeah, see, but at the time when I read it, I didn't, because he's alive to me.
Okay, so in your head, when the drone signaled dead ? What did you think that meant?
Well, I guess I don't know what I thought about that at the time. I thought that it was just because he was so unwell that he was going to die.
Okay, all right, that's valid. Fair enough then. Now, is there anything you want to talk about in the next few pages? I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
I'm happy to skip ahead.
So you get to the point where Livuetta says, "This is pointless." The old woman shook her head. "And you are a fool." She looked at Smar. "Don't bring him here again." And then poor old Elathema, "Livy," in all caps. And then Smar trying to comfort him. "Sharadnine, it's all right," Smar said, going to the bed and down on one knee, taking his shoulders in her hands. There was a crack as one of Livuetta Zakalwe's hands thumped down into the top of the table she stood beside. The man wept, shaking. The drone sensed odd brainwave patterns. Smar looked up at the woman. "Don't call him that," Livuetta Zakalwe said. "Don't call him what?" Smar said. Smar could be pretty thick, the drone thought. "Don't call him Sharadnine." "Why not?" "It isn't his name." I do like how Scaffin's offering commentary on how thick Smar is, because she hasn't been having communications with the ship in orbit about
the culture has to be messing with her, though, right? Like, they have to know.
Well, the implication is that this faction of the culture doesn't know, because they just had nothing to do with this bit of the galaxy.
When have we had factions in the culture introduced in this book?
Consider Phlebas definitely had a sense that there were the culture.
Yeah, but you don't
factions.
know in the timeline, right, of where this book sits compared to that.
Well, this is introducing into that idea, really.
Because they are kind of put forward as an all-knowing.
But certainly in Consider Phlebas, there was a big moment, remember, when a huge chunk of the culture said, "We're not hanging around for war. We don't believe in war. Why are you fighting the Adirans?" And they left. And that, we discussed that when we did Consider Phlebas, that there was this big moment when the peaceniks in the culture said, "Screw you guys, we're out of here." But
shouldn't they all just know everything? Because they're like the culture.
Even they can be selective in what they share, just like anyone.
I really feel like it's a bit of a dick move to Smar, frankly.
What, putting her out here without knowing what she's dealing with?
Yeah. She's dealing with this psycho.
I just want to quickly note, it's only my own headcanon that the slow ship from the Civil War was culture sponsored. I'm inferring that from the text. It's not explicitly stated. So it could be that this is the first time any part of the culture has ever encountered this system, and it's arcane history. Moving on. But Smar began. She shook her head suddenly. "He's your brother, Sharadnine Zakalwe." "No, Miss Smar," Livuetta Zakalwe said, taking the drug tray up again and opening the door with one hand. "No, he isn't." And then we get the sense of panic introduced in the chapter. "Aneurysm," the drone said quickly, and slipped through the air past Smar to the bed, where the man was shaking spastically. It scanned him more thoroughly, found a massive blood vessel leakage pouring into the man's brain. Now, I think this might be the last time it was socially acceptable to use the word spastic in any sense.
Yeah, I was. But I mean, that's literally what the word means there.
Yes, I mean, it is the correct rather than the derogatory sense of the word. But
I thought that too when I read it. I was like, I'm like, wow, 80s. And then I was like, actually accurate.
Yeah. I still think if Ian Banks was with us today, he wouldn't
Probably
have used that
would have
word.
would have got the old right click thesaurus out.
Yeah. Now, I did get a sense when the drone's smashing Zakalwe to pieces to save his life that it really likes cutting humans apart.
Oh, totally. He was really into it. It was like any sort of surgeon, though. You know, surgeons, how they just love cutting people open.
Remember we had that chapter right at the start of the book where he killed all those bandits. He thoroughly enjoyed that. Sorry about this, ladies, the drone said. It produced a cutting field and sliced through his skull. He stopped breathing. Scaffin used another aspect of its force field to keep his chest moving in and out, while its effector gently persuaded the muscles that opened his lungs to work again. It took the top of his skull off, a quick, low-powered crew blast. And crew is basically Ian Banks trying to make a new word for laser, coherent radiation-emitted weapon. Mirrored off another field component, cauterized all the appropriate blood vessels. It held his skull to one side. Blood was already visible, welling through the folded grey geography of the man's brain tissue. His heart stopped. The drone kept it going with its effector. Both women had stopped, fascinated and appalled at the actions of the machine.
That's a good one.
I mean, can you imagine? You're having a conversation. There's a guy you think is sick, but you don't know is, in a crisis, and suddenly, his skull's ripped off and
someone's like pumping his chest through a force field.
Yeah. And then the crucial line, Sharadan Zakalwe, my brother, Liviuetta Zakalwe said, died nearly 200 years ago, died not long after he received the bones of our sister made into a chair. Which is quite something. I mean, at this point, Elithiamel on this planet is basically Hitler. And what we're looking at is if Hitler suddenly returned, I mean, today or 100 years' time, and was, just hanging out wanting to talk to people. I mean, there was a movie, I think it was called Back Again or something like that was made around the idea of Hitler reappearing in Germany in modern times. The man you know as Sharadan Zakalwe, facing it by facing it, that's all I ever did. Staberin Zakalwe, the name's hurt, but how else could I? Is the man who took my brother's name just as he took my brother's life, just as he took my sister's life. But he was the commander of the Staberind, he is the chairmaker, he is Elithiamel. And then
I just like how she just walks out. Like she's like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Boom, mic drop.
But she's basically saying, this is Hitler.
Yeah.
And then Smart turned, face almost bloodyless, to look at the body of the man lying on the bed, while Scaffin worked on, engrossed in its struggle to make good. So, there's your twist.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
You weren't expecting it?
Well, I just hope he dies.
You hope he dies?
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm not going to give you that spoiler.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Although maybe he should just live on and suffer. Because clearly he does want to...
That is an interesting concept.
He does want to... Because he's constantly, he really wants to speak to Livy. He's trying to get her to engage.
Now, I'm going to ask you to cast your mind back all those years ago to when we started reading this book.
Oh, God.
It was
a different person.
It was one of the very earliest chapters where he's murdering the ethnarch. And he talks to the ethnarch about these magical far-off people, which he's referencing the culture, who instead of punishing horrible warlords, make them think that they're living their best life.
Oh. But the culture don't know it's him.
This bit of the culture doesn't know it's him.
So, well, is this what's going to come out in the epilogue? You're giving me spoilers.
I mean, do you want me to tell you if it comes out
No.
in the epilogue? No? Okay. Anyway, it's an idea that is worth hanging on to. And yeah. Anyway, it's a reference because the culture's given him everything he ever wanted. He gets to command armies, he gets to fly around the universe, he gets to have sex with pretty women.
It's horrible. Why would anyone do that to someone so evil? That's an awful thing to do.
But they also make him come to face some sort of accountability for his actions.
But they should just put him in prison like a normal society.
Well, the culture don't put people in prison. They put them to work. And they put him to work achieving what they view as...
Well, he doesn't seem to have suffered or even been repentant.
Well, he didn't suffer. I mean, they chopped his head off.
He's
he
not
had
repentant.
He had his ligaments cut and got raped. I mean, the horrible things that's happened to Zakalwe, you suddenly feel a lot better about, really, once you know that he deserves it all.
True. Right, well, I guess we'll wait for the epilogue for that one.
Okay, so there is an epilogue. There is a very important poem, and we are going to have to pass poetry. Sorry, folks.
Oh, God.
It's okay,
the poetry is going to be the worst bit for me.
And then beyond that, there's something that looks like it's the preview of a new book that doesn't exist and is actually the end of this book. But we're going to tackle that all in the next chapter. But before we go, Sheridan, tell us what you thought of this chapter.
I mean, it was very good.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't suspecting it.
Right. Did it change the way you thought about anything?
Well, yeah, the whole book. Like, I understand it now. The forward, the backwards. I get it.
Okay. There are two ships in this chapter: the Xenophobe and the Stabarin. What's your favourite?
What's the one that's museum?
That's the Stabarin.
All right, I'll go that one.
Okay.
And my favourite character?
Yes.
I'm going to go Scaffin.
Okay. Scaffin is the star of this chapter.
Yeah.
For all that he's a homicidal little lunatic. Okay, so we have one more chapter to go to finish use of weapons, and then we'll have to talk about where we go next with this podcast. But that's I think this is going to be quite a long one for us. Thank you so much, folks, for hanging around. We'll do a proper farewell adieu at the end of the next episode. Sheridan, any last words on how this went? You wanted to talk about the twist, and I don't feel we've fully elucidated your feelings.
I think we talked about it quite a lot.
Okay, all right. You feel we've done enough?
Yeah.
No worries. Well, thank you very much, folks. Hopefully we will be back before you're too desperate to hear from us again.
Thank you.